Good evening, everyone. Just want to welcome you all here tonight. But before I introduce, I just want to implore you, if you are a resident of Houghton, I know there are lots of people from other areas here tonight, to support your residents' association. We are a small group of people and we do a lot for the suburb, and you might not know all the things we do because you're not in touch with us, and we'd like to send you that information. So please sign the register that's going around, even if you are from another suburb, just so we have a record of you here tonight. Right, so tonight's been possible because we've got two gentlemen from Houghton who've been very proactive. We've got Mohammed Sidat sitting in the front row. Thanks, Mo. And Yassine, who's not here tonight. But it was their initiative to set this up, and thanks, Nico, for coming with your able team. So Nico's the MMC for Environment and Infrastructure. Got it? And he's got his city engineers. Are they city engineers? Okay, he will tell you all about them. Okay. But I'll leave it to you. And at the end, we'll walk around with a mic if there's comments and questions. Oh, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Natalie Webb. I'm the chairlady of Lower Houghton Residents Association. Okay, Nico.
So, therefore, come please. We have a choice of who we want to throw oranges at tonight. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nico de Jager, and I'm the member of the Mayoral Committee for Environment and Infrastructure Services. I wish that we could meet under friendlier circumstances than what you've experienced over the last last week, rather. But I think it is very important for me to give you a brief overview of where we're coming from, and then also exactly what had happened. And although it looks like a really difficult situation for you, having lost power on and off for so long, for us it was actually quite an achievement. And you're not going to like me saying it, but the reality is, if that did not happen, you would have been in total darkness today. And I'll give you a reason, an explanation why. I've got with me tonight very clever people. I'm very happy to say I'm going as the political oversight or leader. I've surrounded myself with exceptional talent. I've got Tefo right here, who's the project manager on Sebenza. And just raise your hand. I've got general manager, who's Sipho Hamedi. And on Sunday, when I spoke to Patrick O'Halloran, he said to me, Sipho is probably one of the most brilliant engineers I've ever met. And I'm not ever going to argue with Patrick either. Then we've got Diki Governor, who's also been working on a project and is also one of our very, very competent engineers, also according to Patrick. We've got Noel Masu, who's also, again, a man that I've been working with and who's done a number of public engagements with me, and sometimes at very, very short notice, because we're not going to run away from our responsibility. And then I've got a chief engineer at City Power, young Patrick O'Halloran. Now, this is the reality. In November last year, the mayor, Councillor Mashaba, had a project where he spoke about the backlog in infrastructure. And those of you who followed the news or read the news clippings that we sent out, we talk about that 170 billion rand backlog in infrastructure, refurbishment, maintenance, etc. in the city all the time. 170 billion rand backlog. City Power alone has a backlog of 19 billion rand. 19 billion rand. This year, we increased our capex spend by 25%. That means 25% more than what we had last year. But that's for both new connections as well as refurbishment. And we're only on 1.1 billion rand for this coming financial year. But we are moving towards getting to that 2% of refurbishment of our existing infrastructure. That's what our aim is. But it's a process. We need to spend 60% of all our capex that we have in the city. We need to spend that money, 60% of that money, on refurbishment of existing infrastructure. And at the moment, and clever people can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're spending around 35%. 35%. We've got infrastructure on electricity dating back to 1929. Sebenza substation was built in 1945. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that we're in trouble. We had discussions with Eskom since 2006 to upgrade Sebenza, because actually Sebenza, most of Sebenza belongs to Eskom. And Eskom's been putting it out, and at the moment they said, or their current expectation would be to refurbish Sebenza in 2022, 2023. I think you then understand when I say, thank goodness that the city was proactive in starting a process some time ago. If we hadn't, this entire area would be dark today. So some years ago, 4 years ago, we started investing about 1 billion rand in total in Sebenza. That is to upgrade the facility from 1 transformer to 3, from an 88 kV line to a 275 kV line. And for literally 5 hours before we could bring the first transformer online, 5 hours before that, we lost power. We lost power from both Eskom as well as from Calvin. And no sooner did we get it up and running when one of the gaskets blew on a brand new transformer. When that gasket blew, we didn't quite know the extent of the damage. We then started negotiation with Calvin, who still supply some electricity to the city. They then increased their capacity, or the load that they supplied to the city. We got the electricity up and running, we connected everything again, and by Saturday afternoon, the old infrastructure from 1945 and the 2018 infrastructure stopped talking to each other. And we burned one of the jumpers in the process. That is when you use aluminium versus copper, the oxidation in the process, we lost power. And again, we had to start from scratch, fixing all the jumpers, etc., replacing them. And then, of course, by 9:15 on Saturday evening, we had power restored. In the meantime, we had an option. We either load rotate, or one area will be without power for 3 or 4 days. I think it becomes simply a matter of humanity. We decided to load rotate. What's the difference between load rotation and load shedding? Everybody asks that question. Load shedding is what Eskom introduces. Load rotation is when we lose capacity the same way and gets introduced by city power. So that's what we did. That's the option that we went for. And also, there's added risk. If you don't load rotate, if you don't rotate the supply, you will not be able to pump water. Then you'll be without water and electricity. So sometimes even when we send out that rotation, that schedule, we have to change the schedule at the last minute because the reservoir is running dry. And again, it becomes a matter of information. What do we do with the information at hand? I believe that we've done the right way, what we've done. Then on Monday night around 12 o'clock, midnight, just after midnight, the original new transformer, and I might just add, it's a brand new transformer where we lost power on Thursday. That transformer came back, and we now have a steady 275 kV supply into this area. But we've gone one step further with the new Sebenza. We haven't got 1 or 2, but 3 transformers to serve this area, service this area, roughly 200,000 households that we're servicing, with 3 transformers as opposed to the previous 1. So I think what we've done in terms of the city, we were very, very proactive in our approach. In fact, the job done by City Power was so amazing. It was such an amazing job done. And I wish I could take all of you on a visit to Sebenza, because it's the biggest of its kind, I'm told, outside of Europe. The biggest of its kind, and it's all done by South Africans. It's South African products, it's South African cables, it's South Africanly produced transformers. It's an amazing job. When you walk in there, you think, wow, where do you even find people that can operate this? Let alone commissioning a new transformer without decommissioning an old one. That's what we had to do, because remember, we had no backup supply. We had 1 transformer and 1 chance. And because of the amazing job done by our engineers and City Power, we managed to switch load without decommissioning a load, if that makes sense. It's like, it's never heard of before. You always decommission to commission. Now, it is also my job to spin, people would say. I'm the politician, of course I'm always going to tell the nice bit. But that is the reality. We are faced with 170 billion rand backlog, 12.5 billion rand backlog just on water, and 19 billion rand backlog just on electricity. Bear in mind that we cannot afford to just lose power in Houghton or any of the surrounding areas, because it is your money, your rates, your taxes, your tariffs that allows us to expand the network into areas where we have people who's never had electricity before. And I was quite amazed. In 1982-83, City Power, or Johannesburg, started the project of electrification of Soweto in 1982-83. Before that, Soweto had no electricity. And why am I telling you this? Because it is important to understand that about 20% of the population had electricity until then, and the bulk of the people did not. So coming from there to where we are now, I think we've done an amazing job in terms of cross-subsidization. And I have to ask that when we communicate what we are trying to do in City Power, that we always recognize the work that we are doing in the city. And then, of course, there's the question, what happened yesterday morning? At 4:30 yesterday morning, just after we commissioned the new transformer, 3 of our substations lost power. Prospect, Delta, and Signa. 3 of them lost power at the same time. Oh, sorry, it was actually Eldorado Park also lost power. Now, Eldorado Park, we could flip the switch and it was no problem. Nobody understand what went wrong at Prospect, and when our teams got to Delta, 4 or 5 hours later, we managed to solve the problem. And immediately people went up, took to social media and said, it's load rotation. It wasn't load rotation, it was a power failure. And there is a difference. There is a big difference between load rotation and a power failure. Load rotation is always what we introduce knowingly. Now that's the reality of what had happened. How are we mitigating, making sure that this won't happen again? There are no guarantees, but come the 25th of July, we are turning on this second transformer at Sebenza. And by November, we would have completed that project, and we cut the ribbons, etc. But come 25th July, there's hardly any chance of anything going wrong. And the reason why we're spending this money, we recognize the level of expansion and growth in that part or this part of the city, especially towards Modderfontein. What we're doing now is to secure electricity supply for the next 40 years. I think that's a very responsible way of doing it. In the meantime, as I said, with the 19 billion rand in backlog, we also have to now start a process of refurbishing and maintaining our existing infrastructure. So as a city, over the next 3 years, we will be spending a very handsome amount of money on refurbishing 13 of our substations across the city. That will further secure supply. And that is fortunate. It's across the city, and we can make the entire list available. I think I've got it here, but we can do that. So just before we start, and I don't know which one, Tefu, you were the project manager at Sebenza, maybe if you can also just give us an overview of the great work that we've done. But I really want to appeal that you understand the challenges that we have when we talk about 170 billion rand backlog. And when we first started talking about it, people really thought that we were joking. But when I took office early last year, it was explained to me that one of our substations, or one of our transformers, literally kept together with chewing gum and string. And there's only one guy that can operate that thing if it goes down, and that's an oak in a bomb suit. So it's not. Only he knows how to kick it to get it going, and I'm not even joking. It's serious. But if it goes down, we lose power to the entire area, and that is why we prioritize Sebenza. Unfortunately, in the beginning of this year, we had to shift budget around, and we had a bit of a budget cut, and that slowed the process down. But come November, Sebenza will be fully completed, and we will then also be, probably by November, December, we would have done a significant job of CapEx spending on other substations as well. But what impacts on you and your supply would be Sebenza. And I think we're on the right track, and I sincerely hope that we will not have a repeat of what you've gone through over the last week or so. Thank you. Defo?
The MMC is taller than me, that's why he's the MMC. So I hope everybody sees me. Good evening, everyone. Sanbonani Dumelang. I studied in Bloemfontein at some point, but my Afrikaans sometimes just disappears when I need it the most. But I'll sort that out. Let me thank the MMC. Let me thank the community leadership, my seniors at City Power, and let me apologize for running a bit late. I just cut it too fine from the office. Apologies for that. As the MMC explained, maybe let me just give a small, I know there are people here, engineers and very smart people around seated here. So if I'm a bit too simple in my explanation of electricity, just bear with me, just for the benefit of those who don't have a deeper understanding of how electricity works. Sebenza substation, as the MMC said, it's one of our main intake substations. We, as City Power, we purchase electricity from Eskom on the main, and a small portion of our electricity from Kelvin Power Station, which is adjacent to the new Sebenza substation where we're constructing. Now, a substation like Sebenza, when we say it's an intake point, maybe I can liken it to a dam, a water system, which is, everyone is familiar with how water flows. So you'd use Sebenza as a dam, and you'll use the substations that are local, like here, Sidna and Greswell and so on, as the reservoirs. So Sebenza as the dam would supply the reservoirs, which is your local substations. And from there, then you'll have the pipe that reticulates the water to the houses and for different uses. So it's the same with electricity. So Sebenza is the dam, your local substations are the reservoirs, then you have cables that bring the water or the electricity in this instance to the houses and the different places. So then it follows, if you have problem at the dam, it means the reservoir suffers. It means your taps run dry. So it's the same concept with electricity. So sometimes somebody can say, how am I being affected by Sebenza, which is sitting at Spartan on the eastern side next to Kempton Park, when my substation, from what they told me, is Sydney, which is across the road. So that's how you get affected. As the MMC explained, the project would have been coming online in 2020 according to the initial ESCOM plan, master plan, because the intake substations have to be located next to the ESCOM extra high voltage networks, because that's where we have to connect with ESCOM. So it so happened that for this one, particularly for the two reasons, the ESCOM transmission network on the Eastern Corridor comes to that area next to Kempton Park. But secondary to that, we have the existing Kelvin substation, and to locate this new substation there would assist in terms of making sure that when we transfer from Kelvin to the new Sebenza, we are able to do it, the interconnectivity close by, but also to connect onto the ESCOM transmission network. So that transmission network, 400 kilovolt to 275 kilovolt, has not come on board yet. And the 2020, which was the initial indication that ESCOM gave, is also not coming on board. So if, as the MMC explains, if we had waited on ESCOM to resolve whatever issues that they have in terms of their plan on the project, we would only bring Sebenza that we are busy with, that is responsible partially for the outages that you've had recently, would only be bringing it in 2023 probably. So it means that these outages, because of the constraints at Kelvin and the Prospect, which is the intake line that we're using on the southern side, east-southern side, it means these constraints would be a reality and our winters would be bleaker than they are currently. And I know it's not nice to have electricity. It also affects us. It's the same. It's a pain to be without electricity in winter. So that's the timeline that would have been looking at. So the city would have been in greater risk of prolonged outages, not just load rotation, but outages for days, probably weeks, because of those constraints. So when we realized that we wouldn't wait for the 2020 time or 2023 timeline, then the city made a decision to say, let's go ahead, let's construct Sebenza substation, and let's use one of the existing lines on the Prospect side and upgrade it to give us a connection point at 275 kilovolt, so that we can have increase the capacity from Sebenza, improve the reliability of supply, but also more importantly, provide additional capacity to ensure that the developments that have been put on hold from the economic point of view can be fast-tracked and come on board. So based on that decision, then we started with Sebenza construction in 2014, late 2014. We went on site. It was around October, so we've been in the construction phase, silently hidden there in the industrial area for the past 4 years almost. So the reason why then you've had this hiccup is that, as the MMC explained, when you are constructing and interfacing an existing network with an old one, it's like fixing a car that is moving. So you're trying to fix the car while it moves, and that's why you have to do this coordinating and interfacing. But because of the old infrastructure, some of the work that we have to do requires that there are outages. Some of the things that are old, you are hoping they don't fail before you are completed, but some failures we've experienced in the past week, that while you are busy with the new, the old fails, and that is beyond your control because you had planned to decommission it at some point in any case. But sometimes it fails, it doesn't wait for you to decommission it. So that's how then we found ourselves having to fast-track that project. And in the fast-tracking, we were looking at the winter to say, we have to get something done before this winter. As the MMC has explained, the plan for the project is to complete in November. So it means we wouldn't be doing anything. We would wait for November, connect all 3 transformers, bring the MMC, the mayor, and the other important people to cut the ribbon, then we transfer power from Kelvin. But the constraints that we have currently forced our hand to say, let's do something to bring 1 transformer at least in the beginning of June so that we can alleviate some of those constraints. Unfortunately, it is that transformer where we had a gasket failure on Thursday, and the process to recommission or re-energize a transformer after you've lost some oil is that you have to top up the oil. You have first find a seal, and those are our largest transformers that we've purchased actually ever as City Power. So you don't have those kind of spares off the shelf. So you have to get the seals, switch everything off, install the new seal, get new oil because the transformers are cooled with oil, so we have to top them up with oil. Those transformers take 90,000 liters of oil each. So if you lose some oil, you're looking at 3,000 odd liters of oil that you have to top up. But the oil is not just any oil. It has to be purified first. It has to be tested first by an independent lab. They say this oil it passes the test so that you can then top it up on the transformer. So those are the processes. Then you top it up, then you have to then test again. Then you switch the transformer on and you allow it to warm up, if I can call it that, like a car before you drive some cars. I know some people don't have cars like mine that needs to be warmed up first, but cars normally warm it up for a few minutes before you can drive. With the transformer, it's the same. So you have to warm it up for anything between 24 to 48 hours before you can connect customers. So it is on, but it is not connecting customers. So that entire process is a few days' work on its own, just to get it back again. So that's what the process we went through. And now, as the MMC has explained, the transformer is on. We took load yesterday, was it yesterday? On Monday night, when we had this other constraint. So we moved some of the load to the new transformer, and the transformer is still holding, and we are fast-tracking, as the MMC has explained, to bring the second transformer by the 25th of June. And of July, thanks. That's how much I wanted to be done. I would have been done by June already. So to get that second transformer, just to improve the reliability again, to say while we are working on the third, then we'll have two transformers. So from a transformer point of view, we would have minimized our risk greatly. Now, somebody may say, why don't you do all transformers at once? As the MMC explained, unfortunately, because of the interfacing and working with live equipment, having to switch certain sections of, you have restrictions of what you can do at any point in time. And the human resources as well, certain things you cannot commission in parallel because you introduce problems downstream. So you have to make sure that you are methodical, you follow everything in the sequencing, and you've tested and proven everything. Just as an example, that transformer, if our protection was not commissioned properly, we would have lost that transformer. It would have gone up in flames, probably. But because of the protection that is commissioned properly, that is checks and balances that are done, it was switched off automatically without somebody being there on site, because that is how you commission it and set it up that way, so that it has its own integrity, it has got its own protection that kicks into action whenever you have a fault, instead of having the transformer burning. So that's where we are in terms of Sebenza, and we ask you to just keep us in your prayers for the coming few days, so that we finish that commissioning of the second transformer and we can improve the reliability. But the project will complete end of November, and we're pressing hard to make sure that happens. Thank you, MMC. Thank you, Committee.
There are just two other points that I forgot to make, and that's the first one. When the city cut the budget back in February, when we did the adjustment budget, I think this is where we need to look at our contractors. And in this case, we have phenomenal contractor and also our, what do you call the engineer, the consulting engineers, that's done an amazing job. We cut the budget on Sebenza, but the work continued. The work continued because of our relationship that we have with the contractors. The MD went to the CEO, went to the contractors and negotiated that they will not invoice us until yesterday, until Monday, for work that they did in the first 4 months after the budget cut. And I think that shows a level of commitment, not only from the side of City Power, but also from the side of the contractor. You can imagine when you deal with so many hundreds of millions of rands, it can really force a company into liquidation if they don't receive payment. But they did so knowing that they will get the payment eventually, which is now happening. Now, that's going to bring me to, just before we open up for questions, to a really sticky point, and that is the communication. communication over the last year or so from City Power was exceptionally poor. And I have been standing on my head, and I've been fighting and screaming and shouting, and some of the councillors will know that exactly how upset I can get about something like communication. It's not my job to communicate on Twitter. I do. But I also rely on information that I get. And it's by no fault of anybody on this stage. The communication was bad. And the reason for that is also, I wouldn't go that far, because there are times that we communicate, and I don't want to, that's fine. So let's agree to disagree. But I also receive the messages that goes out. And I want to appeal to the media that when we communicate something like this, that we actually must get that communication out. Because City Power can reach people on social media. And there are interventions that we're now looking at, sending SMSs. We had an urgent meeting yesterday to deal with this issue of communication. And just this morning, we signed off on a very expensive new media communication manager that will start on the 1st of August. In the meantime, I've been assured that everything possible will be done from City Power side to ensure that as we move ahead, communication will be more smoothly. Okay, let's not, I can't talk about the call center. That's got, fortunately, very fortunate that's not part of my portfolio. That's part of the finance portfolio. But the call center is a challenge, and we recognize that. That's also the reason why the call center is doing so bad, is because you have equipment dating back to 2003, 2004, and it was never updated. It's so bad, in fact, that when SAP came to look at the call center and to assist us, they turned around and said, we're not touching it because there's been so much fiddling with the system that they didn't recognize their own system. So we recognize that, but you have to understand that to turn this proverbial tanker on a tikkie is not that simple. It's a long way, and I made it in so many times, and every single opportunity that I get, I've said, over the last 18, 19 months, I made it very clear that in all probability it will get worse before it gets better. But you are very lucky in this area. I know you don't think so at the moment, but you are very lucky. Because with Sebenza coming online, and with the second transformer coming online, you will not feel what people to the west of the city feel. And then let me give you an example. Back in April, we had load rotation for 4 days in the Roodepoort area. But because the people are poor, we didn't hear the same noise. Because the people are poor, the media didn't pay the same level of attention to what was going on in Roodepoort. And that in itself is quite a pity. Because I always say, we all deserve an equal quality service, irrespective of whether we live in Sandton, or whether we live in Soweto, whether we live in Lenasia, or whether we live in Houghton. We all deserve an equal quality service. And I think with the interventions, no, sorry, sir, you will have the opportunity to speak but I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to interrupt you. The fact of the matter is that we give everybody the same quality service, doesn't matter where you live. And I have people shocking themselves, electrocuting themselves on a weekly basis during this time because they've not had the privilege of an education that you and I had. So when you tell me about elections and stuff like that, I'm not playing politics here. It's a fact. People in Thembelihle do not have the opportunities that you and I have, only based on the color of their skin. And 24 years later, you can't change that. It's going to continue. And I think we have to recognize that the past where we're coming from, it's not that simple. You can't just say, get over it. You can't get over what so many of our people went through. And I think we need to recognize that. It's a very emotional topic for me. I worked in that area for 5-6 years. Every single day of my life, I understand what people go through when they live in an informal settlement, when they are so desperate, when they do not have a toilet. So it is a priority. It's correct. It is a priority for the city. And unashamedly, as Herman Mashaba would say, this is a pro-poor government. And while you have some level of service, there are people without any service for many, many years. We have that. We owe people that much to at least bring some level of service to all our people. And we cannot make excuses for that. I think if you want to take questions.
On. I'll come round, but can we keep the questions constructive and unemotional? Okay.
Thank you. Let me commend you first for the efforts that you are putting in ensuring that poor people get the services that they deserve. You've commented and said that the nature of the communication that you've had has been very poor, and a gentleman in the corner there said it's non-existent. Your response, and in terms of how you are going to rectify that, is only based on the employment of a single individual to manage the communication to constituencies, I don't know how many. Is that all you have got? Is that going to improve the communication, the quality of the communication to the residents? Is there anything more that you can put on the table?
Nico, are you going to respond at the end? Or, okay.
Good evening, everybody, and I would like to say that yes, it is incredible what you guys have done. It really is fantastic. And I will say even the local technical guys are not only hard workers, they're polite, they're nice, they're quick. So to all of you, great commendment. To the management and everyone who made this possible, there's no question it's outstanding. But I will try very hard, everybody, very hard, to be positive in what I'm going to say. But I hope in as much as I'll put the effort to be positive, I hope you'll all hear me. The bitter anger, you talk about people and not everybody here. Obviously, most of the people here are better off than some people in the country, and I'm sorry about that. But not everybody, and I get offended that it keeps coming out. There also needs to be acknowledgement that some of the people who are seen to be wealthy are not. And I'm sorry, everyone. Now let's see how cleverly I can speak. I'm not a great spinner, and I'm not sure how to make this positive. But City of Johannesburg is one organization. You told me, or we all know, you desperately need money. And I'm going to say something. The zeal with which City of Johannesburg acts now, if we lose the people that are doing the positive steps now, we're going to go backwards. So I would like to think if we'd like to carry on this momentum, we need to keep the people that are making a difference in place. But City of Johannesburg, everyone, is City of Johannesburg. And when you talk about budget, sorry everyone, you are spending millions in the most terrible accounting collection thing, which I'm prepared to say, and I say without prejudice, but I want you all to hear me. You need to hear me. You are wrong. You are breaking down earners. You are frequently bad, and there's no question I myself can prove it. The number of man hours for which everybody here pays, the inefficiency right up until Monday this week. So if we're City of Johannesburg, you need the money, but you're asking us to stand by you. Oh, we're sorry. The job you've done is outstanding. Sorry, guys, I think you all got me. Stop wasting millions on your accounting department and get it sorted out.
Look, we don't want to, I think a good point was made. We don't want to make statements. This is a constructive questions about what happened last week. And if you're not satisfied, those are the questions to ask now. Please, short. Otherwise, I am going to take the mic away.
Guys, I'd just like to thank you for what you've done at Sebenza. I'd really like a tour of Sebenza as well. I'll speak to you after that. As being an engineer myself, I think it's quite an unbelievable, an understanding of what's actually going on there. Couple questions that I have. I've always played my part in being fairly city power friendly in that whenever I see a mini sub door that's forced open, I report it immediately. Whenever I see a chamber door that's been forced open or a vandalized chamber, I report it immediately. Okay, even if I'm passing by, it doesn't have to be by my house, because I know that as you speak about the integrity of the system, and you relate it to a dam. If there's a burst pipe, there's a burst pipe. Okay, and the same thing happens with electricity. But what I'd like to ask now is, what is the city doing in terms of, we mention about the infrastructure, we mention about the integrity of the system. And to me, the security and the actual stealing of cables, the forcing open of chambers, this is the real world. It does happen. And we're not going to prevent it from happening, especially in the society where we find ourselves today for whatever reason, okay? What is the city doing in terms of having an easy, I'll give you an example of my point here, in that on the corner of Athol and Louis Botha Avenue, a mini sub has been open there for over a year on the HT side, okay, on the MV side. And it's a dangerous situation, okay? Surely someone from City Power, what is City Power doing in terms of their guys driving around the areas, inspecting the infrastructure, seeing what's wrong, and attending to it? To me, it falls in the same category as the achievements of Sebenza to do that. Thank you.
Okay, one more after you.
Sorry, I apologize for being interrupting before. But on the internet and things, social media, there was no communication. And the other thing that we did notice was it was all in the northeastern suburbs. Places like Edenvale, which is a hell of a lot closer to Sebenza than we are, had electricity all the time. When you said that the West Rand had a thing in April last year or the year before, we didn't know. I knew people that lived there, but there was no, you say load shedding, load whatever. That's exactly the same thing, just two different councils doing it. The government, or Eskom or City Council. Basically, it helps nobody. It's the same words. We are achieving absolutely nothing, and when you're talking about the people who were disadvantaged, yes, they were disadvantaged. I agree that they're still disadvantaged, but what we have to do is bring them up, not lower everybody else. The same with education and everything else. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm only doing one. Who was? Okay. Question only.
Sorry, I look like a bank robber, but I'm cold. Okay. First, I want to also to congratulate the engineers, who obviously are in a very, very daunting task to catch up with all the backlog for the last 60 years. My question was, is there an integration in the city of Johannesburg as a, because it's a business. In a normal business, your various departments, your various business units are integrated. What kind of integration there is in order to deal with this backlog of 190 billion, and obviously the repairing of all the electrical, sewer, road requirements, with the fact that in another area of the city, you have got your town planning and your building departments, which allow a huge expansion and power and services requirements, which almost mismatch the fact that we have to provide a minimum level of service to a lot of disadvantaged areas in Gauteng, and I don't know what is the equilibrium in the catch-up situation, but I believe in certain areas these millions of flats which are rising and unplanned densification mismatches the fact that the city needs first to catch up, rather than to require more painstaking efforts from the engineers to provide more electricity capacity. So are the two hands talking to each other, or the two areas or 5 areas in the city of Johannesburg, or are they integrating the efforts, or they're letting the engineers in a daunting catch-up situation for the next 40 years? That's my question,
Okay, if I can just, Tefo and Noel, if you guys can just come closer, then we can deal with some of the questions. On the communication, it's not as if we have a shortage in people communicating. It is that we don't have the management of that process. And I think that is where we've been lacking. There's been no controls of the management. Like we've had challenges, and I call them challenges loosely, around historical challenges around maintenance, even something as basic as a servitude under our power lines. Those were not being maintained. You will remember sometime, I think it was the 25th of May, we had a massive power outage, Alexandra, and parts of the east as well. And that's because of a fire under a servitude that was not being maintained. Those are today, just today, we introduced to the executive of City Power 2 new ExCo members. We've been operating with skeleton staff in that space, all because of suspensions, and you can't advertise before the whole labor issue that we had. And today we appointed, or rather introduced to the ExCos, appointed last week 2 new ExCo members, one dealing specifically with maintenance, and as somebody that understands, and when I spoke to the team afterwards, they're all in agreement that this is the right person. So and I was hoping that that Isaac Rampedi would be here tonight, but I only gave him notice about this today. And the second person is a lady called Nancy Maluleka that we introduced in metering, because that's part of the problem. We've had problems with our meter reading, etc. And that's a whole different topic. I don't even want to go there tonight. But we started that process, and that is why it's about managing. And we haven't been managing the communication the way we should have. And I didn't want us to just take somebody from group communications in the city, and then we end up having, and I know that's what we did in City Power in 2010 when the billing crisis started. It was when the city centralized the billing in the city, and everything went to finance. And when we had to give our people who were doing the job, we didn't give them the best people, we gave them the worst. And I didn't want us to take somebody from group communication, from central communications in the city, and then we end up with more problems than what we should have. So I'm very happy that we are going to have a management capacity in that area. Ma'am, again, I hear the positives that you were saying, but also we are working tirelessly in keeping the power on. Between myself and my colleagues, I can tell you, a 6-hour sleep is something that won't easily happen again, and I'm hoping for 4 every night, then I'm happy. When it comes to, and I'm going to just touch on some of them, and then Noel and Tefo will do on the touch on the rest. Just your question on why did Ekurhuleni have electricity? We don't supply electricity to Ekurhuleni. That's not coming from our side. That comes from Ekurhuleni. So they don't take electricity from us. We supply electricity to the residents of Johannesburg. So when we introduced load rotation, it was the areas that were affected by the downtime in those substations. That is Prospect, again, it was Prospect, Delta, and the one, Fort, no, not Fort, the Robertson, whatever. There's three of our substations that were affected by that. Only 3. So we had to rotate the load. It's not because we wanted to do it, because believe me, it is residents in Houghton and Sandton and Bryanston who are responsible for bringing in the money so that we can expand our services and provide services to people that cannot afford to pay, because we do have that obligation as well. You know that when we took away water, free basic water, 6 kiloliters of water, we took it away from people like you and me and gentlemen over here. And we gave more to the people who doesn't have a job, who cannot afford to pay. That's just the way economics work. Everyone in this room can afford to pay 42 rand for 6 kiloliters of water. But when you have no money, where do you get 42 rand from? And it's the same principle that applies with electricity. We have a responsibility in the city to cross-subsidize where people do not have the means to pay. And that's what we were doing. Just in terms of the planning, Noel, I think you're probably best equipped to speak on the planning issues. And then on the active citizenry, that's what you were referring to, sir, and I couldn't agree with you more. We are going to look at ways. I'm very happy to say that in my own office, I'm capacitating my office with somebody who just went on retirement from City Power, who's going to further help me to hold these guys to account, because he's as clever as they are, and that's going to help me a lot. But that also means that we're now going to enter into a phase where we can rely more heavily on people like yourself who wants to take responsibility for substation, mini substations, etc. Okay, Tefo and Noel.
Thank you, MC. I'll be brief. I'll leave the rest of the difficult things to Noel. He's smarter than me, so I'm strategic like that. So, but on the issue of planning, maybe just from the network infrastructure point of view, as the MMC has explained, the 19 million backlog, it means every year when we plan, we have to plan to stretch the little that we have to cover as many of the most pressing issues as possible. And unfortunately, in all communities, all the issues are pressing. So if we had sufficient budget, we would roll out the refurbishments, upgrades, rollout of all kinds of infrastructure from an electricity point of view in all communities. But unfortunately, we do not have. Just to give you an example, the Sydney substation that is nearby here, we refurbished it 4 years ago. Brand new equipment at that substation. But you may ask a question to say, why do I have a power failure if that substation was refurbished? Again, it's the different parts of the water analogy that I used. to say if you lose Sebenza and Sidna depends on Sebenza upstream, you will lose Sidna. And the same way, if you have an equipment failure from Sidna to this side, because until you've done the entire end-to-end network, you still sit with risks on equipment that is old on your chain of the network. So if you've upgraded the substation, but you haven't had funds as yet, remember, as we say, from the political side, they have to balance all communities. Because if they find out that Sidna was upgraded and your cables are upgraded, and now you've got Sebenza and your street lights, then it would appear like this community is being favored against other communities. So that balancing act is the most difficult one when you have constraints. So you'll find that you have the substation that's upgraded, but you encounter an outage on a cable that comes this side, a medium voltage cable. At 11,000 volts, you are not doing the 88,000 volts on the substation. So that is why, as MMC explained, that the communication needs to improve, because those details, if you are explained for in the communication to say, no, this power outage this time is not Sebenza again. It's not Sidna. It's actually a local cable that supplies this section of the neighborhood. It was stolen. There's cable theft, as you alluded. There are things of vandalism and so on. So there are myriad of problems when you have an outage. It's not one thing all the time. And that communication will help, because you'll know that you are not encountering the same problem over and over again. But from a planning point of view, that is where the constraint is, to say, how do you balance and make sure that you keep the lights burning, which is a difficult exercise that these gentlemen do on a day-to-day basis, while you are looking at where you avoid a total collapse of certain equipment. That, as you say, the equipment that's 50, 60 years old, older than me, on our network, and it's still on. And if you lose it, you don't have space, you don't have the budget to go quickly and do that, because it's not even on the plan. Because on the plan, there are certain things. But if you have a total failure, you need to then, as an emergency, move certain things up the plan, because there's an outage. So something else has to fall off the bandwagon. So it's those difficulties that we have to just keep on doing with little and try to keep the lights burning on a day-to-day basis. I'll hand over to Noel.
Good evening, everyone. The name is Noel Maso. Firstly, let me thank everyone for giving us an opportunity to actually engage about the recent spate of outages and the challenges we've shared, and I think the MMC was very articulate on that. Mine will be basically to respond on the day-to-day that we're experiencing. And firstly, I want to applaud the gentleman for being an active citizen and actually making sure that, the infrastructure that ultimately we all own, somebody takes, that sort of responsibility to say, guys, this is open, this is vandalized, and so on. I thank you so much. And I assure you that by the time we leave this meeting, I will ask my team once again to go to Louis Botha and actually make sure that Minisab is closed. But now, I'm sure as you drive around, you see that a lot of our Minisabs, pillar boxes, even street lights, they get vandalized, they get opened, they get for no reason or for reasons that are unknown, to the bare eye. So what we've basically done, we've tried to use engineering to curb such activities. So what you see happening now is that we are rolling out our vandal-proof structures, where now if you have a mini-sub and you close it, no one can open it unless you use a special key or a card. And if any of our guys, because sometimes, under pressure people may make mistakes and they would leave it open, we will then have a center, we'll be monitoring such structures, and they open, and then somebody will be sent through to actually close it up, and we'll know exactly who went and worked there last and didn't close it. So those are some of the new things that we're trying to bring along, just for technology to catch up with the social ills that we have out there. But more than anything, I think I want to appreciate the community. I've had a lot of engagement with different customers whenever there's outages or they've got individual problems. And 98% of you actually come across as understanding and polite, and I appreciate that. That is why we make sure that whenever there's calls, we answer. It doesn't matter what time of the day, and painfully as it may be. And during the outages, between the MMC, myself, and the rest of the team, easily, I'm sure we must have spoken to over 1,000 people, different people. And it wasn't easy. So whenever maybe we seemed like we're a bit abrupt, we'd like to apologize for that. And we'll try and improve on the services that you're giving us. So what more than anything we're looking at is improving our efficiency in our day-to-day, while Tifo and the team look after now how do we actually ensure that the network can cater for everyone while we catch up with the backlog as clearly articulated by the MMC. And I think Tifo has touched on the infrastructure planning. What I'd like to bring through is just to inform everyone that we've restructured ourselves within the operations group so that now we've got a focused drive on maintenance. And that maintenance is heavily supported also by Dickie's team, who then do condition monitoring. So what that basically means is that we'll go out and do some detection as to when will a specific, whether it's a cable, whether it's a transformer, or any piece of equipment likely to fail. And then in between, we make sure that we effect the necessary maintenance so that now we prevent the outage and rather let it be a controlled event. So those are some of the things that we're bringing along. So when it comes to infrastructure planning, I think Tifo has covered that greatly, MMC. And I'm certain that everybody has got an understanding. And I thank you.
Just on the issue of the high-rise developments or densification and so on, to say, do we match that approval to the availability of services? From an electricity point of view, definitely, because everyone that needs a new connection, if you're building a house, whether it's a multi-story or single-story house, we look at the capacity in the area, and that's when you apply for it. When they do the quotation to say how much it will cost you to do that connection, that study of the available capacity has to be done. And that's why, for that reason, why Sebenza is so important, because we're providing 1,000 MVA. When we measure electricity capacity, we use the MVA to tell you the size. Your Sydney substation, I'm using the station close by. It's about 135 MVA, so you can compare it with 1,000 at Sebenza. So it's almost a 10th or 13% of what you have at Sebenza. So the developments in Modderfontein and those new developments would not happen if Sebenza doesn't come on board, because that area on its own is going to take almost half of that. But there's going to be sufficient capacity even for other developments that couldn't go ahead in the greater northeastern region of Johannesburg because of that additional capacity that will transfer. But as I explained, then it means we have to then expand the capacity downstream as well, because we have to increase that so that we can take on more customers and improve the reliability. Because if we don't do that, we'll put a strain, because then it means the strained network will come with more outages. So that's why you expand it all the way to the street level. Thank you.
If I can just say something to the MMC. Firstly, thank you all for coming this evening, sacrificing your own time. It's not easy. And certainly you've been very helpful on Sunday evening when we called to give us the details of what's actually happened. Having associated myself with a large mining house, one understands why maintenance, building of the infrastructure and having strategic spares is important. And the reality is engineers often get pushed to cut corners because they want to keep the production going and the operations going. And when that happens, something gives way. So even in managing expectations, when you're building a new project, I hope July 25th works as plans, but just manage that. Occasionally you will have a blowout in a new development where there could be a problem. So one needs to manage that going forward. But certainly you guys have been very helpful. And call center experiences have been bad. I wouldn't disagree with it. But in one instance, a guy was very, very helpful, walking and explaining what happened in your reservoir system. And he gave me the list of 6 substations and the power stations which impact on our area, which is useful. Just on the area of communication, one suggestion, and this is really what I wanted to say. We had a similar problem to what you had, trying to communicate to about 40,000 miners in 7 different languages, real time, to improve safety. We tried every trick in town. Websites, communication, putting it up on the notice board, it just didn't work. We then came up with the simplest method of communication, which is incentivizing, because we found everybody had a cell phone. So how do you incentivize to push down messages on cell phone? And that has actually worked wonders. We had to incentivize people by giving free airtime first to get them to start to log in. And it's actually worked very well. So if it's helpful, I'm very happy to get our communications to sit down with your people to show how it works. Because invariably, every person has their contact details on your billing system. And you can push down the messages very easily. So very happy to assist in that regard. And finally, hats off to the people from Joburg Water who repaired that leak in Rosebank. I was there for about 5 hours when they were repairing it. And they showed me the infrastructure which is knackered. And amazing with the tools they had to join the pipe 6-7 times to get the water flowing that evening. And I just wish we were a bit more polite to the workers there. I found 2 people running across saying, "Hey, have you fixed the water?" And the person said, "Yes, we have fixed the water and you can swim." Not a word of thank you. They just walked. And I think that needs to change as well.
Are there more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sorry, we're just dealing with this side, then we'll come back to this side. No, I know what you look like now.
Hi there. I'm sort of slightly on a less political issue. One of the things you didn't mention was before we had this outage, there were lots of high and low voltage swings. I was literally getting, in Parktown, on a 3-phase line, I was getting somewhere between 350 volts and 440 volts. And obviously that's not too good for your equipment. So I assume that relates to the fact that we were on the old transformer. But I'd like to know if that's in theory now stable and should now be resolved, and if I can expect a stable voltage. And then obviously relating to that is there sufficient power, which again I assume relates to the new transformers. And then just more of a bit of a comment. And this is relating to the logging of calls, so it's similar to everyone else, but I'll just give you our feedback. When we log calls and people come out, they come out and they say, "Oh, there's no low voltage at the moment, and there's no power failure, so we're just going to close the call." And obviously that isn't very effective. So then you log it again, and another person, and another person, and another person. So we eventually went through 4 technicians in our scenario, and finally we got someone who was not clueless, because all the other guys were clueless, I'm afraid to say. I'm also an engineer, so speaking from experience. And we found someone who was qualified and reasonable. But unfortunately, we had to find him through a friend of a friend of a friend. It wasn't through the call center. So I'm just that's the feedback in terms of the call center. And then, yeah. And also, can you give us your numbers for future so we can call you? Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for sorting this out. In my area, we've been without power since last week, Tuesday. And there are lots of elderly residents in my area. Some are very ill and rely on refrigeration and power to keep their medicines alive. My problem is substations. I live next door to a substation that gets broken into very often. I myself have personally put padlocks on the gates. Okay?
That's mini subs.
Yes, the mini subs. I go out, buy the padlocks, and I put a big sign on the gate that says, if you want the key, go around the corner. I also put on the chicken wire fencing, I put about 20 meters of razor wire to try and stop people from jumping over. And when your technicians went into the box, they removed it. So I'm trying to secure the mini sub, and then I have City Power people removing it. So I'm happy to keep replacing padlocks, really. Because when, as a community, we complained about it, we were told that City Power didn't have money to buy padlocks. So I'm happy to replace them every month, however often. But can we please try and secure these mini substations? Because we all lose appliances, we all lose whatever when the power goes.
I just wanted to really thank you guys for being here and having this venue and people coming together as people that are accountable, doing the incredibly difficult job that you are doing, and having us come and communicate. What I wanted to ask, and I don't know how realistic this is, and I realize that it's not your department and you tried to explain something about it, which in fact left me feeling a little dismal, with the billing department. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can have some kind of representative forum like this so we can get explanations and try and keep some sense of civility and understanding so that we can at least have a sense of common purpose and communication. Is that at all possible?
Yeah. Can we have one more question, then I'm going to try and answer. And Patrick, if you want to also come and deal with
This is a very quick question. You've told us about Kelvin, etc. What about what comes before Kelvin, what's supplying Kelvin, and that's Eskom? Is there any update? Do you guys know what's going on with Eskom? Do they have the capability, etc.? Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to quickly go through these questions. First of all, thank you very much for that offer. I can tell you when we had our meeting on Monday morning in the mayor's office, I had it with the CEO, I had it with the chairperson of the board, or rather yesterday morning, and we specifically discussed the communication issues. And one of the things that we were saying is that if we can have access, now, this is part of the problem. As City Power, we do not have access to the SAP system. So we'll supply the electricity, we'll supply the meter, but that's where it ends. We read the meter, we stand behind a huge tall brick wall, we throw all the information over the wall, hopefully somebody catches it, and the rest of it is out of our hands. We've been fighting. Personally, it's been a fight that I took on back in October last year, to try and bring the entire value chain of device management back to the entities as we used to have it before this awful program called Pakama. And Vic Penning sits here, and I know he's going to back me up. Since Pakama was introduced into the city, that's when this billing mess happened. So that's most definitely something that we can look at. And also that access to SAP is now being granted. We just can't feed any information into the system. But that will then give us the opportunity to communicate directly with our residents. Now, again, this is something that we didn't have until 6 weeks ago when we started this engagement. I also started an interdepartmental engagement or forum, I don't know what to call it, but task team, where we deal with the billing issues. Because unfortunately, it's always, I cannot tell you how many billing, that's why I'm not going to give you my telephone number, how many billing queries come through on my computer, even from my fellow councillors. Because in the past, my department, wrongfully so, started solving billing queries. All the billing queries now comes to us. And that's not actually, we don't have the time to do that as well.
Sorry, I'm not interject because my question is directly related to that. We get a bill for 40,000 Rand and get told, pay the bill and then we'll look at resolving it. It's not the appropriate time. It's fine. Thank you very much for your contribution. Why don't we get it resolved?
I cannot respond to the billing queries. That's finance. And I wish I could, but it's not, it's out of our control. We can work with the departments, and I can assure you, we do. For the past 2 weeks, every single morning, we had City Power, Joburg Water, pick it up, sitting with finance and billing and revenue to find ways and how we can collect and meet our targets very successfully. As a result, we've decided to continue over the next year in solving these problems. We've got now a dedicated team just solving billing queries. But I cannot go into the details of that. I think it's unfair and it's a completely different meeting. But most certainly, ma'am, what you're asking, my colleague, as I'm making myself available, and I'm sure you're sitting right next to the chairperson of the Finance Committee, Vic Penning, apply pressure on him and make sure that we have a billing meeting to discuss this as well. But I also want to give you a little bit more history. 11 administrations came together in 2002, 2003 to form City Power. That's where a big chunk of the problem started. 11 different companies came together on the same line, and of course you can expect trouble. And that's what had happened. But it doesn't matter who did what and when. And once I went to a workshop together with the economic freedom fighters, and they said, and I love to quote them on saying this, when you took office, you inherited all the good and all the bad. So I'm not going to blame anybody, because there's a lot of good also that we inherited. But unfortunately, people only come out to talk about the bad, which is why we're here tonight. We've inherited some really bad, rotten apples, but we are dealing with it. I believe that we are pulling in the right direction, and all of us, City Power, Joburg Water specifically, are all pulling in the same direction. And I'm happy that you mentioned the issue of what happened in Rosebank, because that's a classic example of rotten infrastructure. You might remember what happened last year, November, when we had the burst on Limbro Park, on landfill site. Again, we had no communication. I went there, and for 5 days, that's what I did. I communicated with the residents. I must also tell you, my Twitter account increased from 223 followers to 4,000 in no time. So the art of, or rather the value in communication and on social media can never be discouraged. But not all our residents have access to that. When it comes to medication and outages, ma'am, and again, we have so many issues around security. We are going to go on a project where we are going to ask and appeal to residents to take responsibility, as you are. But at the same time, a normal padlock is not good enough. We need the specialized Eskom padlocks, and that's something that we have to invest in. We need to invest in critical mini-subs, those that get vandalized all the time. We need to start investing in protective structures around those. Last year, I made 10 million rand available. That's a drop in the ocean, by the way, because we've got 18,000 mini-subs at 100,000 rand, Patrick, per structure. It's not going to give us that many, but it would go a long way to at least solve some of the problem. The then CFO did not spend a single cent of that money. I'm also happy to say that we are now, today we signed off that we can go out and find a new CFO, because that CFO was suspended. But we are going to deal with security, which is key. Let me tell you, theft and vandalism contributes enormously. And back in 2002, 2003, cable theft and vandalism was about 5% of our total spend. Now it's 45%. It's not unique to Johannesburg. It's Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, all the smaller municipalities all have the same problem. Again, about 2 months ago, we had an inter-municipal forum created to deal with theft and vandalism so that we can have better synergy between all three metros and the other municipalities. All of us have this problem of theft and vandalism. So it is a massive problem for us. Also, what we're doing going forward, and I'm not sure how many of the team here knows about it, but when we had the big outage in Roodepoort, it was as a direct result of an attempt to cable theft, and ended up frying one of our transformers. We had no spares, no spare capacity. Eskom then loaned us a borrowed us one of their mobile transformers, which we had to go and fetch all the way from Rustenburg. And if I had to tell you the headache that we had around getting that thing to Joburg, it's a different story. And we did that without the approval from all the various metros and police departments with an abnormal load. And then on Monday morning, one of the things that we're going to push for extremely hard for budget, come the mid-year review, would be for us to buy a mobile transformer, at least one or two. At least have one of those things, because we don't have it. If we can just buy one, it's about 40 million rand. Maybe one of the mining houses would offer to sponsor one. But that will go a long way. If we just have one or two of those on standby, when we have a problem like this, then we can quickly deal with it. And we won't have to sit with the problems that we're sitting with. And I have to say this, one of the beautiful things that we inherited, and I jumped up and down on Sunday afternoon when we visited Sebenza. All of us met at Sebenza to see how we're going to fix this. I mean, how am I going to fix it? I studied politics and economics. But I looked at them and they try and tell me, and I'm not an engineer. It was double Dutch to me. But you know what? One of the beautiful things that we inherited was 2 footbridges across the M1. Beautiful. It won an award, and I'm very happy that the MD for CO for JDA is not here tonight. They won't like it when I say this, but we spent millions and millions and millions of rands on 2 footbridges when we haven't got infrastructure. Millions of rands we spend on bicycle lanes when people don't have money for bus fare. What are we doing? What were we thinking? We've got a bicycle lane from Sandton to Alex. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's state of the art. But who's going to use it? That is when we have the wrong idea of what is needed for the people. People don't have toilets. For God's sake, there are people without toilets, without running water. We have pipes like in Rosebank. If you think that's bad, go to the Naledi camp and see how raw sewage are running everywhere because the city hasn't invested there. So when I get emotional about this, or it sounds like I'm talking politics, I actually want to cry. I worked there for 5-6 years of my life. Every single day. It was once upon a time when I was there, Lenasia and surrounds, which included Thembelihle, the best constituency, I might tell you, in my political party, which we are not here to talk about, but the best constituency in the country, for a reason, because we worked hard together. But we have to recognize that there is so much that we have to do, this much with this little money. But we can't waste that little money as we have been doing. Patrick, no, are you? Thank you.
Thanks. I see Patrick is a little shy tonight. I will just respond on the 3 issues raised. The first one regarding the low voltage that we started experiencing. Just to give a bit of background, on Tuesday last week, and I'm sure that's when you started seeing the low voltages. No, the NEOS is a specific case. Yeah, because there has been exacerbated low voltages since Tuesday last week, and I'm sure most people must have felt it. But what I'd like to do, maybe after the meeting, can I kindly just have your address, and then we'll send people to do some tests and check what's happening there. So maybe I shouldn't go into that one. Okay. All right, and when it comes to the issue of the securing of the mini-sub and the chicken fence being removed, I sincerely want to firstly apologize if our guys removed that fencing, the razor wire, okay. The thing is, we actually welcome customers, helping us to secure our infrastructure. And we've got a project, I'm sure everybody knows of it, of the Adopter Lite. So it's a similar project to me, where everybody owns a piece of the network, because that infrastructure and that network is actually ours, like I said before. So we'll try and have a look at that. If I can also have your address, and we can look at that. And then the last thing I'll talk about is with regards to Eskom. As the MMC has actually alluded to the relationship that we have with Eskom, it's improved tremendously. And Eskom are ready to assist us in any regard because they've got most of the infrastructure. And we know that we all saw a bit of a glitch with regards to their operations when they had a strike. And I'm not going there. But, with regards to their generation, we communicate every morning, and they're very stable up to so far, and everything is looking good. So we keep strengthening the relationships that we have with them with regards to their supply points to us. Now, when it comes to demand side, which is now where DIFO gets frustrated, it's something else. But when it comes to the normal dispatching of their power to us and us getting it to you guys, we'll be pretty stable. Now, if there's any changes, definitely the first thing we'll do is ensure that it's communicated, because ultimately it will have an impact on you. And yeah, I'm not sure if I missed anything, MMC. Okay, thank you.
If there are really any more questions, also I think it's probably not a bad idea for us to. So there's just two more.
Just one question I have. Was the building in Sebenza built to replace Kelvin?
No.
So Kelvin's not being...
No. We have a contract with, I'm going to answer you, we have a contract with Kelvin until 2021, and I'm going to appeal to the mayor that we do not end that contract, that we rather renegotiate the contract and possibly at a lower rate if possible, or you never know. You never know with the supply. Kelvin is also currently looking at a plan of using gas and possibly PV, so to become more green and more sustainable. So we are welcoming that, and I think it's in our best interest to keep some level of supply from Kelvin. We don't want them to sell all their energy to neighboring countries, and then one day when we need them, we don't have them. Ma'am.
Hello?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, ma'am, I haven't got the details of Joburg. Joburg Water is in a very fortunate position where they actually have their own call center as well. And I don't have that. But I don't have the details with me. Yeah, absolutely. Through the GPS, etc. And that is something that the city is currently working, because we've got too many apps, that we should have one consolidated app that can immediately, and that is something that we keep on talking about, and I haven't followed it up from our side to see how far it is, but it is going to be controlled centrally through the central the Department of Communication, but then that we should speed that up, and I agree with you. Can I just, two more on that side, sir?
I'm going to go to bed tonight a happy man. And to know that we're in good hands here. That's for sure. And I think the biggest single problem, and I think the agencies are the reason most of us are here.
Communication. Yeah.
What floors me a little bit is for all the intelligence and the quality that you have up there on that stage. That isn't one of the biggest priorities you have, because had you had that, I don't think 90% of us would be. So other than that, I'd like to thank you, and really, you got my vote of confidence.
Thank you very much. Again, I just want to say, in the head of communication on Friday morning, one of his family members had died and he had left. And that's no excuse, because there should always be somebody else. And on Friday morning, incidentally, I marched into communication and stakeholder management at Reuven, and I was blowing a gasket no different from a 90,000 liter oil gasket at a transformer about the lack and poor communication. And I thought it would improve, and it didn't improve. But it's also, let's just hope it doesn't happen, because I promise you, we now have better communication in place going forward, and we are going to push for it as well. And I apologize again. I apologize, and all of us felt that, because if I want the information, I call Noel. I slept for 2 hours on Saturday night. I don't know whether Noel slept at all, because every time he closed his eyes, he got a phone call from me. And I don't think it was always comfortable for him. But we are going to improve on it. That's a promise and a commitment to all of you.
One of the issues, I think, is maintenance. And I don't think enough time has been spent on talking about maintenance. The one thing that I notice everywhere is jobs don't get done once. They get redone and redone and redone, which points to a management weakness.
It's also, it's more than that. It's also the OPEX and CAPEX problem. It's also about audit findings. But I must tell you, the new executive member that was appointed today, and we specifically spoke about this, before City Power introduced a shift system. How long ago was that? Before they introduced this shift system some years ago, we had 27 engineers or engineers on call at any given time. We're now lucky if we have 5. So again, this had to take a new managing director, a new CEO rather, because he changed his title, but a new CEO to come and realize that we need action. From Joburg Water, because and we're going to get you, from Joburg Water, it's the same thing. Joburg Water, we run around patching. What we've done from the 1st of July, what we started doing, we implemented a first line of response team in each and every depot, 24 hours a day. So every single day, there's a first line of response team that when there's a burst, go and isolate immediately, 24 hours a day. And then if there's not a burst, get busy with something else. But if we can just get that right, that will cut our losses by probably 3 or 4%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enormous. Just to give you an example, on water, we went from 35,000 bursts a year 5 years ago. Right now, 45,000 bursts a year because of poor maintenance practices. Maintenance is key. I couldn't agree with you more, and that is exactly what we are focusing our attention on. I know the team didn't want to admit to it on Sunday when we spoke about this, but part of the problem is that we did not focus the attention on basic maintenance, the changing of oil in a transformer. 90,000 liters of oil, you need to change it every now and again, every 7 years, and maybe it didn't happen in good time. But that's why I think most of the people here are fairly new, so I think the energy is enormous. And we have, as Noel had said, I personally make an effort to have a very good relationship with Eskom. Irrespective of what their problems might be in terms of their board and their top structure, the people that we're dealing with are phenomenal. They are great. And I cannot emphasize that enough. The problem is always at the top. And that's what we're focusing our attention, to keep the top happy, and then filter it down, the bottom will always be happy as well.
Sorry, there's one last question I want to ask you. What about alternative energy? What are you doing to encourage householders or corporates to do something?
We're not doing anything because we want your money. Ma'am? Okay. First of all, let me just say to you, irrespective of whether you live in Sandton, Houghton, or Roodepoort, you're going to get the same quality service. You don't get prioritized because you live in Houghton. Everybody, irrespective of how much rate you pay, get the same quality service. That's what we aim to do. So I'm not being flippant about the renewable energy, but maybe I am, but at the same time, it is important for us to find renewable energy sources. When I say we don't want you to use renewable energy, I don't want you to go off the grid. As an entity, we need to find more sustainable ways of doing it. But we don't want you, as a consumer, to go off our grid. That's why we have this project, and we have a project of refurbishing 13 substations across the city over the next 3 financial years, and that information can be made available. That's not a secret. And again, I'm not sure how far we are in terms of rolling out the security, but we are in the process. But I'll let Noel get to that. Sir?
Evening. This gentleman alluded to the fact of maintenance being done by unskilled people, or people masquerading as being skilled, and redoing work. That is one of your big problems that you guys have got. You guys and Joburg Water. That needs to be looked at immediately. Your technicians going to sort out kiosks, that type of stuff. The mistakes that you see that they pick up are elementary mistakes. It's mistakes that a qualified electrician shouldn't be making. You guys need to pay attention to that. And then the second thing is, with your problems with budgets and finance, why aren't you guys making it easier for people to go into prepaid? Why aren't you making prepaid a sexy thing? Places in Houghton, everything should be prepaid over here, so that other people that you want to go on prepaid look over there and say, but those guys are prepaid. If those guys are prepaid, why don't we go and do prepaid? Water, electricity. Most of your problems of collections are water and electricity. It's not rates. It's not sewage. It's not that type of thing. It's your expendables, what people are consuming. That's costing you guys money. And I don't understand why prepaid isn't becoming the focus to get money in. Thanks.
Just on the prepaid issue, from a Joburg Water point of view, we're only starting with the rollout of smart meters, which is what's required for prepaid water. And on a City Power, from City Power, I think we've only got about 23,000 of the old style meters that we still need to replace and upgrade it. But the current meters do make provision, and it becomes a calibration matter. And I think it's something that we can look at and should be looking at, and I fully agree with you. Many people across the city has started on prepaid at households, and I think it is a way to go.
A lot of us have got the smart meters. It's got the capability of prepaid, but they want to charge us 1,000 or 1,500 rand just to come calibrate the thing. Why don't they calibrate the thing in the first place and communicate with us and give us the option?
Okay.
You know, I mean, the amount of people, the manpower that you guys need to spend money on to actually recoup money, it's like a no-brainer.
You know, at this point in time, as much as you remember I said when we took over, we inherited the good and the bad. We inherited a system, and this is not we as the current administration. I'm talking about the way in which that contract on the rolling out of smart meters, the way that contract was dealt with. It should probably have made provision for that. It did not make provision for it. So to now come back and recalibrate, it's going to cost money. And that means that we have to then charge. It's an unfortunate thing, but it's something that needs to be done. In terms of maintenance, now on Joburg Water, really, doesn't often happen that Joburg Water use contractors. They use their own teams, and there it's just a matter of aging infrastructure. Because Joburg Water overall, the performance has been very good, but we're really not yet to talk about Joburg Water. When it comes to City Power, at some point, City Power started with this process of employing contractors. Those contractors employed subcontractors. In the end, City Power lost complete control over what's happening. If it was up to me, and I think my colleagues over here will agree, we will immediately terminate all contracted workers and focus on our own people, capacitate our own people. We've got the capability, but it's become, and I don't want to say what comes to mind, but you know what, people get busy with shenanigans, and that's what's been happening with contracted workers as well, and see who all can benefit from that. So as a result, you have an instance, it's in the contractor's best interest, for instance, not to necessarily fix a problem properly from day one. It's in that contractor's best interest to ensure that the light next to it will go out as well, so that he can come back and be guaranteed of ongoing jobs. And that, I believe, is probably what's been happening in a lot of instances, and I'm not saying in every contractor is equally as bad, but I do believe that as City Power, we need to take back what belongs to us and do the job ourselves as far as possible. No, or therefore there's something. Thank you.
It's fine. I'll just talk about the padlocks and then that's it. All right, I'll be very quick. Now, with regards to the padlocks, we actually, MMC, just to inform you, we have finalized, the process of getting the Eskom strong padlocks. And tomorrow we're sitting with the supplier, to ensure that obviously Eskom can't gain access to us. But it will be rolling those out. Communication will come out, and we'll see the action actually on the ground with regards to the padlocks. Thanks.
Sure, it's gone on. Thanks for giving more time for questions. I hope it's been informative. I think knowledge is power.
And the recycling?
No, we can't talk who asked that?
It was advertised that you were going to do recycling tonight.
I didn't see that.
By the councillor.
We have to have an...
By the councillor.
Is Eleanor here? The answer was...
I did mention that I would ask the MMC and I'll get the information back to you. Okay.
There's a problem in the way which it's been done. You're actually taking income away from the poorest of the poor.
Sorry, I need to correct that. If you're talking about us taking work away from the reclaimers, that's absolute nonsense. There is no way that is happening. At the current moment, 10% of all waste in Johannesburg are being recycled, is being recycled, 10%. With what we're doing with separation at source, is making it easier. So when you leave your bag outside your property, that reclaimer can now go through that new clear bag and take what he or she wants and not dig in a dirty rubbish bin. What we've done is to bring mobile buyback centers closer to the recyclers, reclaimers, so that they don't have to pull that trolley for miles and miles and miles. What we have done, what I have done, is to negotiate with the Department of Health to inoculate waste pickers and reclaimers going forward against diseases such as typhoid, hepatitis A, and hepatitis B. What we have done in Pick It Up, as we are rolling out our new garden sites, is to make provision for storage facility of trolleys at that dumping site or landfill site, wherever you are, wherever Pick It Up has a site, to make provision for storage of trolleys. What we are busy doing is negotiating with corporates through their CSI projects to provide protective gear and gloves to waste pickers and recyclers. So it's anything but the truth to say that we are taking money away from the poorest of the poor. If anything, we are strengthening that relationship. When it comes to the recycling efforts that we are currently doing, and I will touch on it very, very briefly. There are some 200,000 households that will be affecting immediately as of Sunday, where we're talking about mandatory recycling. Norwood, Lenasia, and Midrand receive blue bags because there we have contractors in place, and we've had them in place since 2009 on a voluntary basis. Other areas, and we have a whole list of areas available on the website, on the Pick It Up website, some 336 areas that is, where we are also rolling it out with clear bags. All you need to do, separate your plastic, your metal, cans, tin, your glass, your polystyrene and paper. Put it in that clear bag and do not, and rinse it out for that matter. It makes it a lot easier and prevent cross-contamination. But there is no way that it's true that we have excluded reclaimers or trolley pushers in any way. We are working towards getting up to 30% of all waste to be recycled by the end of 2020.
Well, in Buccleuch, they're trying to kick them out. And also, we have a problem where I don't see that you're interacting with Scheme Psalm, because I've spoken to the organisers there, and they're the ones who actually started it off.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Scheme Psalm? You know Scheme Psalm?
Yes.
Okay. They've been down into Buccleuch to actually help the people. They're working in terrible conditions, and all that's trying to happen is to kick them out of there, and they cannot go anywhere, and they need protecting. I'm glad you've given the information. I would not have had to ask this question if you answered your emails.
It's I actually take great offense to that, because I can assure you, I answer every single email that comes to my office. And I can assure you that all this information has been made available over the last 2 weeks. I personally did 56 radio and TV interviews on separation at source. You've had every opportunity, if you want to call me, and I'm available for an interview on that.
Thanks, Nico. Thanks, team. I hope we don't have to have one of these in the near future. Thanks all for coming. Okay.